What you do? Greetings. So, turn up the video speed. My question is from a video and in a conversation I was listening to, and it kind of got about something I've observed as well. Are modern women capable of being ladylike anymore? Classy, not trashy. And I merely use Miss Piggy not as a gesture towards modern women and their size, rather than it's pretty funny when she says that and then whacks somebody with her purse. But anyhow, where am I going with this? This is Freedom Phil. Like and subscribe. Turn up the video speed. And why do I always say that? Because you should be watching this video at least at 1.75. And once again, building the channel. Let's get into this. I was listening to this interview and they were talking about how this lady over in one of these Asian countries, she plays piano. She does it really well. And they were talking about the concept that in the West, you see these women basically taking the route with their body of OnlyFans. And I'm not judging what you want to do with your body. It's your life, your choice. You know, do as you please. But to sit there and say that there aren't long-term consequences to such behavior and foolish behavior, and I'm, once again, not trying to control you. It's your life. Do as you want. I mean, I'm a big believer in that song by Bill Anders. It's my life. I'll throw it away if I want to. It's a fun song. But what they brought up is this lady who plays piano. Before she even starts playing, there's like 3 hours of playing, and people will request songs. And she'll make about $50 per song, and she'll be completely booked out long before it. And she'll act demure and ladylike and just humble, which is something that a lot of women these days, if we're being honest about, would act like that's some form of oppression, at least in the West. And what I found really interesting about the concept of it was I've seen this with some ladies in my own life. And by the way, if anybody thinks I'm referring to you or any of your friends, I'm not. I'm just making a general observation. But yeah, I have seen this in my own life where there's women that I've seen that go the wild route, and some of them didn't have such a good turnout for that. The results were not good. And then there's the women that saw that and said, I don't want to be like that. And so they ended up effectively, some of them even stayed virginal until they got married, even in college. Some of them effectively, they had a plan for their life. They had a solid plan of a good degree. And I mean good degree, not like the situation where you see 85% of the degrees women get are useless. 50% of the men's degrees are useless as well. So look at it however you want. But they had a plan the whole way along, and they weren't trading their body, their class effectively for cheap trinkets. And we've seen this kind of thing in modern Western society since, I don't know, whenever the sex positive movement of the 60s, where it became, at one point, it was liberating to do such things. And I think one of the problems with that liberation is that a lot of the mothers that were doing that, they look at their daughters and say, hey, whoa, slow down. But we turned it up to hyperspeed. And, you look at the average payout that a lot of these OnlyFools chicks get, and it's under $1,000 per month. Now, I'm going to have to wonder if in the far off future, because it'll be so common that, before the great AI takeover of OnlyFools, and they're like, what do you mean the AI takeover? Look, the artwork is getting to the point where the machines can make women that look better than the women that show up. So we're going to see an exodus of, actual flesh types. There's going to be a replacement there. And so there's going to be all these chicks that effectively someday some kid's going to be at school. And it's sad that it's this way. Just like if your mother was a prostitute. People will talk. But there's no escaping. You could escape, you were a stripper or you were a prostitute back in the day. You just move how many counties or another state over and nobody knows you. But the internet's forever. And what's funny about it is we come back to the women that are actually doing a huge amount of self-improvement on themselves. Basically they don't throw their ass around. They don't, effectively make a fool of themselves. And they actually are in such a high demand. And what was reminding me of that is that lady, that piano player, that the fact that she acts ladylike, and when she gets the the donations, for instance, the whatever you call them, super chat, whatever you want to call, whatever they do over there in the Asian country, or the gifts. She acts, oh, thank you, blah blah blah. She acts like a lady, and she doesn't show her. She doesn't show herself. She might dress provocatively, but not in a slutty way. And once again, I tell you, I am not telling you what to do with your life. I'm just telling you what I'm observing. And it seems in the West now, the woman who has actually, and this isn't, by the way, there's so many fakers now with this whole trad chick movement that even a lot of guys are like, okay, this is just another fashion trend. But someone who is legitimately classy, ladylike, and demure, effectively is actually the queen, whether you like it or not. So we come back to the thing where it's like, and I see this with, streamers and whatnot. The constant provocative clothing, which fine, cool, it's your life, do as you want. And they'll act like I'm not this, but then they're constantly leaning over. Oh, hey, and they're doing this other thing, bending over for something, and they're purposely acting provocative. They're trying to get the gaggle of gooners to donate to them. It's just an interesting case study. And it's almost like, you see the joke of it is like, okay, is this the precursor to your OnlyFans page? And by the way, you see that some of the comments you see in those chats are just like, man, I'm over a lot of everything. It's the best way I can put it for me. And you watch these guys and they're like, do. And by the way, this is part of the reason when people talk about the male streamer experience versus the female streamer experience. I'm like, ladies, I get it. You do a little this, and then the gooners show up and they build you a channel. Whereas a guy, you've really got to be talented. And I think It's a Gun made that point clear ages ago. But yeah, has it become to the point in the West where being a classy woman is antithetical to their very existence? Like, not class that you can buy, but actually ladylike. Having your act together. No debt. If you get a degree, no debt. And it's a good degree. It's not a joke. It's not something where you just took a 4-year vacation. Like maybe you're not throwing your ass around. Is that concept, is that, that trade of like, hey, he's going to take you out to eat or he's going to pay your rent. Is that so valuable that you'll trade anything and everything away, which is kind of funny. You'll see women that'll do that game when they're dating. They'll do that game when they're dating, but after they get married, then no, we can't do that anymore. How many guys, just as a question, you can't answer because I've turned off the chat, but how many guys have you seen where how she was before you got married, how she is after? So I don't know. I just think it's kind of interesting when it's a case study for our modern era. And I kind of wonder, is a lot of this supported by, public government assistance? Like even if you fail, if you're a complete failure as an individual, particularly in this case, a woman, there's still a government check waiting for you if you just crank out a kid. If you fake crazy. And that's another thing I've noticed. I think class, and I'm not judging anybody. And by the way, if any of you think it's you, it's not. It's just what I've observed. I see a lot of fake mental illness out there. I do. I see people that seem to get their shit together really quick. And I see a lot of women, and it's like they do that crap. And why? Because I don't know, it works, whatever. Hey, if it works, it's a good tactic. But it used to be, if you had fucking problems, you had to get your shit together, keep it together. And now it's the complete opposite. It's used as it's a manipulation tool in the same way that in the times of women that were more demure, how do you say it, ladylike and so forth and so on, classy. They would frame, there are situations where they could handle things and they just say, I don't know. And then some guy would come along and do it for her. And I get that. I get that. So there's so many women who would think that's demeaning, but I actually appreciate the grand level of manipulation that the intelligent ones have. What do you mean manipulation? Well, I can appreciate the game. Kind of complicated to explain. It's the psychology of it all. How the deep mind works. But yeah, I guess it is interesting to see that in the modern era. And, maybe it's feminism that slowly did it to people, women, and all this in general, that the very idea of being well put together not a net negative, not with a bunch of somebody else's kids. That's now considered, like, oh, what do you think I'm going to be barefoot and pray? No, 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 no. But having class is now considered a bad thing in the West. And maybe this explains some of what you see worldwide where guys are going to other countries and they're settling down over there. Quality men decide, I'm going to go to a country where I'm rewarded for being a good man. And when I get home, I'm treated well. This isn't like she takes care of the house and he takes care of the money. And when they go around town, it's more like, that concept of the 1940s and 50s relationship, well-dressed, nice vehicle, and both of them act like their reputation matters. I think we've gotten to the point in the West where reputation, who you're standing in society, doesn't mean anything to anybody anymore. And it is what it is. I just find it as an interesting phenomenon, because if that woman who's playing the piano, the Asian chick that's playing the piano, can make this absurd amount of money just by acting like what would be considered 30 years ago, maybe 50 years ago, let's be honest, 50 years ago, what was considered a classy, ladylike woman. That tells you how valuable that truly is. Just saying. Anyways, this is Freedom Phil. Turn up the video speed. Appreciate anybody that hit the like, hit the sub. And if you made it through this video at regular speed, I don't know what you're doing. Should have been watching it at least at 1.75. Peace.